This video is about design specifications, so what design specifications are and how we can write and use a design specification in a design project. Now, a design specification should be a very simple part of your project, and it should be very useful as well. However, in my experience, it's the one bit that's done quite poorly in student portfolios, mainly for the reason that it's not really used. Okay, so a lot of students will write a series of design specification criteria, but they will generate them quite often from their head, or they will be quite generic, which means the points will not really relate to their project specifically. It will relate to a project like theirs, or they will just, in the worst case scenario, it could relate to any product at any time. Okay, so it's important for a specification to be good, essentially, to start in the right place. Okay, and the right place would be to analyse your design context and work out exactly what is asked of you in the task, and develop your design brief from there, obviously. Okay, and that should dictate some of the key specification criteria at the start. In addition to this, to clarify the points more closely, it's probably likely that you will have planned your research and undertaken a series of research. We talked in previous videos about producing consumer profiles, analysing similar products, perhaps getting anthropometric data, doing questionnaires. Okay, series of bits of research that are going to give you very vital pieces of information that are going to allow you to make your project really well. Okay, so this will make the design specification very easy to read, right? Because ultimately all you have to do is, if in your design context it says something like, you know, your product should be suitable for the UK market, that is straight away a design criteria. And we can see this student here, he's gone down and he's picked these first criteria here straight from the design context, and it's very, very easy to see that. Okay, so I'd say with your design specification, it's useful to write a range of different criteria. Okay, but it's very important as well to make sure the criteria are very comprehensive and they make sense, and you're not just writing things for the sake of writing things. Okay, now this being said, it's also important not to neglect like important aspects of the project, and that's where structures like AccessFM can come in useful. Okay, so when I'm writing a design specification, it's probably useful, or going back a little bit, I suppose, when I'm planning my research or undertaking my research, I've thought about all these criteria when I'm creating my project. So I've thought about the aesthetics, I've thought about the cost that might be a restraint on the project, or the cost to produce it. I thought about the consumer, the environment, the safety, the size, the function, which I think, to be honest, I would say function is one of the key kind of areas. Okay, and I thought about the materials and the manufacture of the product as well. Okay, so as I say, it's important to use, you know, key criteria to kind of, you know, really make sure that we refine it down, but to make sure that we don't forget anything, it's also important obviously to consider AccessFM, and it's probably likely you're going to do this in the research phase anyway, so it shouldn't come as a surprise to you when you get to the design specification. Okay, now the other key thing, I mean, I lay the specifications out like this. Okay, so we've got sort of three kind of headings at the top. Okay, we've got specification criteria, which is just our brief statements there. We've got our justifications. Now this is our quite an important thing, I think. Okay, so I think the specification point itself can be quite brief. The product must look smart. That's not maybe the best criteria. It's a bit spurious there. Okay, but basically in the justification we can give a lot more information as to why we feel that point is important. Okay, I mean, if we go to the top one, it should be suitable for UK market. There, he's put in there when the product is made. It should be confirmed by looking at the price of similar products. We can find the average product base around the UK market. Okay, that's a bit more sensible than some of the other points, but it's giving, you know, reason for that point to be there, and reason to make it important. Okay, and finally, just to show that you've gone through the process, as I say, because you should have, and that's the point of a design specification, we're going to provide evidence. Okay, so in the case of the first point there, he's put his point, he's given a reason as to why it's important, and then he's shown where in his research that he's seen that that's an important point. In this case, the analysis of the design context and his design brief that he wrote previously in the thing. But this is what I'm saying about how easy the specification could be, because we've done some analysis of design context there, and and this student has written a consumer profile, well, he's got some more points there. Okay, it would have been nice to see a few more, links to other bits of research that he's done, but he's got quite a list of points there as well. Okay, so we have written a range of points. We've based it on Access FM to cover all bases. We've linked the slides to the we'll link the slides and the points together. Okay, now the final thing which I like students to do is to kind of do a bit of prioritization as to what is important and what is less important. Okay, because later on in the project the specification is probably going to be used in the first instance when you're designing to make sure that you do exactly what you're aiming to do in your design brief, and making sure you're not forgetting anything. And later on, as you progress through your designs, you're going to be constantly evaluating and modifying your designs through an iterative process. Okay, so it's probably quite important to have your design specification there as well, so you can see and evaluate against each criteria which is going to be useful. And I like students to in addition to ordering the points from kind of most important at the top to kind of least important down the bottom, okay, to also, where possible, organise them into essential and desirable criteria, and in some cases also to list relevant issues. I'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so essential criteria are things that the specification is absolutely an unbudging point. Okay, if you don't meet an essential criteria, effectively you've failed, you haven't met the task. Okay, now desirable criteria are things more like where there is an area of movability, I suppose, on the point. Okay, so you might say, I'd like my product to be red in colour. Okay, but it's probably likely that the product could succeed if it maybe had aspects of the red colour on it, or you used certain different colours close on the spectrum or something like this. So it's not an unbudgeable point. Okay, but some things are essential. Okay, so in the case of when we're analysing our design contest, as we've seen here, okay, if you're not meeting the points in the design context, it's obviously that your product is going to fail. Okay, so the student here has highlighted essential points in red, as you can see, and I think it highlighted his more desirable criteria from his consumer profile there in blue. Okay, you can also go one step further and talk about relevant issues. Okay, so relevant issues, this is more on the legacy specification, but it also comes into the new design spec as well for the new product design or design technology course. Okay, and relevant issues are the moral, environmental, social and sustainability criteria. Okay, and I think it's a good idea, it's good practice to highlight these points as separate. Okay, perhaps using the colour green because we think of green and the environment. Okay, to talk about relevant issues, and again, this is going to make your design specification that more comprehensive to show that you're focusing on all the points. Okay, so that's my brief guide on how you might create a design specification.